All right, time now for the Picks panel. A lot to discuss. So joining me this morning, Picks 11 political reporters Henry Rosoff and Ayana, and New York editor for Politico Julia March. Good to have all three of you with us this morning. And let's get right to this, right? Seems like there is a new facet of the scandals, as we heard Henry just report, surrounding Congressman George Santos coming out every single day. Henry just laid out the latest. Ayana, you've talked with the veteran, right, who says that Santos scammed him. Yes. And there are now more calls from Republicans for Santos's resignation. Now, look at this. Former longtime Congressman Peter King wrote an op-ed for the New York Times saying that Santos is hurting the House, that many of us love, dragging down the Republican caucus to a shameful place. He does not belong there. Direct quote. But Santos seems to be undeterred, as we've been reporting, by allegation after allegation after allegation. So let me start with you, Ayana. Is there anything that will convince Santos to step down?
I'm not quite sure if there is. George Santos has said the only people who can remove him for office are the voters in New York's 3rd congressional district. We saw Kevin McCarthy just a few days ago not only seem to, say that George Santos should be in the House of Representatives, but he also appointed him to 2 committees. But George Santos may not spend these 2 full years in Congress because, remember, there are multiple criminal investigations against George Santos, investigations locally, federally, and in Brazil. So really, whether or not he remains in Congress may be determined, or that might all change if he's eventually arrested.
Okay, and now he has committee assignments, and it seems to, Henry, correct me if I'm wrong here, besides the voters, if Kevin McCarthy, the speaker, says step down and resign, do you think he'd have to do it?
It would come down to a 2/3 vote, but that would basically signal the end for Congressman Santos, because McCarthy would rally the Republicans necessary, and you get all 212 Democrats to say, get out of here, we'll take our chances in a special election in a district that leads toward President Biden. And let's not get anything twisted here. That's why Speaker McCarthy is not booting Congressman Santos out, because it would lead to a toss-up election with angry independent voters that'd be inclined to vote Democrat, and his very slim majority would go from 4 down to 3. So that's what's going on here.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's move on now to another big issue here in New York, the migrant crisis. Julia, you had reporting last week, right, where the mayor told you that New York City just has no more room to house these asylum seekers. He's taking this to the national stage, as he has been, even making that visit to the border last week. So I guess, Julia, is there any indication that the White House or federal officials are actually listening to the mayor and are going to follow through with the money?
There really isn't. It's pretty much radio silence from the White House. The latest big thing the president did was, try to work with certain asylum seekers and countries in South America to have them stay in their home countries while they process, their applications. But that really doesn't do anything to stem the immediate crises in cities like New York that are seeing a major influx of migrants. Earlier this month, the mayor mentioned there were over 800 asylum seekers arriving in the 5 boroughs in just one single day.
And Dan, I also want to mention, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, they were both in Brooklyn this week. They had lunch at Junior's, and we spoke with them afterwards. And I was trying to get in a question to them about this migrant crisis. When will we see movement from Washington? But they didn't answer my question. It wasn't on their priorities of things they wanted to talk about. So that was really glaring for me, that you have these 2 powerful Democratic leaders in Washington who are from New York City. They're here, and they're not addressing this major issue here in the city.
And briefly, Henry, because it goes back to what you were saying about the slim majority here, right? The Senate says a bipartisan deal to address the border is top priority, but it's proven to be difficult to get done with that tight margin. So what do you think is going to play out?
I think there's going to be gridlock, like everything else that we are going to see during the next 2 years with divided government. That being said, Senator Schumer did secure toward the end of last year this $800 million pot of money to try and help local municipalities deal with this. It's unclear why more of that's not being doled out. But in New York City alone, the mayor estimates that, I believe the number's up to $2 billion by this summer that it's going to cost New York City taxpayers. So it's not nearly enough, that $800 million, for every single city.
Right. I want to talk about...
And I think that...
Go ahead, Julia.
I was just going to say, the next real question, the mayor keeps threatening that city services are going to be cut as a result of the, upwards of $2 billion that is going to go toward the migrant crisis. So that remains to be seen. The mayor hasn't said which services will be cut, but if it comes to that, then that takes this to a whole nother level.
Right, and I think that's what he's trying to avoid by repeatedly saying, I need more money. I want to head upstate because this was a big deal, and it might be a little inside baseball for politics, but Governor Hochul dealing with her first major obstacle of her new term, her pick for chief judge, Justice Hector LaSalle, rejected by the Senate panel. The governor called the hearing thorough but not fair because the outcome was predetermined. Will we see Hochul continue to fight for this judge, or is there another road? I don't know who wants to take this here. All three of you are paying attention. Ayana, you want to begin?
Sure. Governor Hochul has said she doesn't know how she will move forward, but she has mentioned that there are legal options that she can take. But this is a tough one for Governor Hochul. Clearly, leaders in the state Senate have said they just don't support Judge LaSalle, and we've heard that from so many different grassroots groups on the ground. And so, does she continue to dig in? And it's tough. It's a tough decision, I think, for Hochul.
How much oxygen does she want to take up from the budget conversation, where she has things she wants in there? She wants to get her housing compact done. She wants the minimum wage change. So she has other efforts that might take priority at this point.
And Julia, last word here. Let me just ask you this, because this was resisted from the beginning, right? So why move forward when you knew there was so much resistance?
She just wanted to, she claims that it wasn't supposed to be political. In the past, judges, it hasn't been a political thing. But, we're just in a different world today, both nationally and locally. And I think she saw that when you have, labor coming out at the outset so strong against it, and then you have, Democratic leadership saying it's a no-go, it appears to be a real misstep.
All right. I'm going to leave it there. Ayana, Henry, Julia, thank you. We'll be right back.